Hi guys, how's it going? Welcome back to Still Jayden's mom channel. Today I am making a video on the top 5 myths that I've seen about grief. Now, these are the things that just keep coming up in my coaching practice that I work with my clients, or just things that have been coming up on my own grief journey as a grieving mom and as a parent after loss. And many of them were myths that I believed before our son Jayden passed away. So before I get into it, I just want to share that this channel, for those of you that are new and are watching, I've created this channel to process grief through 3 ways and 3 C's. And it is to be courageous, and to create connection and be part of a worldwide community. I'm really trying to use this channel to create awareness and break the silence that a lot of parents feel when they lose a child. And the world will continue to move forward and tends to forget our kids. And so I want to use this channel as a pathway to help other people understand or make you feel better if you're a grieving parent, because you're definitely not alone. So, I want to talk about these 5 common myths right now. Before I talk about the myths quickly, I just want to say, for the context of this video, I'm only going to be talking about the loss of our babies or children who have passed away. Because I understand, of course, we grieve as humans for different types of losses, but for today's video, I'm only speaking of my own experience and other moms' experiences whose kids have passed on and they continue to live their life. So, my first myth that I have heard of is that um, time heals all. I'm sure you've heard of this too, um, and we've heard all kinds of thoughts about time. And I can't tell you how many grieving moms, including myself, that I've spoken with, who are very surprised to learn that they're told that once you get through the first year after the loss, every other year will start to feel better, like somehow things will be better. And or people will say, oh, once you have another kid, you'll be distracted and then things will feel better. And it's not the case at all, because no one kid can take place of another kid. Like, if your first child passed away and you have another kid, society assumes that that second kid will take place of the first kid somehow, like they will fill the void of the baby that passed away. And it's obviously not true. Just because all kids are important and should be given the should be given the love in their own separate ways, even the ones that have passed on, and should be remembered on their own right, like on their birthdays or on their anniversaries, right? um, Now, for some people, and this may be your experience, maybe your second year after loss was easier than the first one, but for many people it isn't. And if you relate to that, leave a comment down below and let me know, because I was one of those people. Like, for me, I had delayed grief. This is what my therapist called it. She said I pretty much was so numb the first year from the shock of our son passing away. And I had a business to run at the time, and I kept myself really busy and distracted. And I started getting this like false sense of security, like, wow, like I'm not feeling anything bad. I'm actually doing pretty good. But really, what was happening was I was just in pure shock, and my body just literally couldn't digest or process those emotions. And some days I spent, that first year not feeling bad. And so my guilt was at all time high. Like, why am I not able to feel bad? I'm a mom who's just lost her child. Like, what's wrong with me? But then what started happening was, in the second year, like they say, time heals everything, but in my case, it's a myth, because the second year was got way harder. Um, I started grieving really heavily in the second year, and because I had tried to bury those negative, hard emotions in the past, I tried to do the same thing in the second year, and I just simply couldn't. I got to a point where I had to process my grief. I had to. There was no going around it. So, time in itself is not responsible for any kind of healing. So, when we avoid our emotions, like when we avoid processing and talking and mentioning our baby's names or sharing with other people on how we actually feel, um, and we try to bury like all the emotions that we're feeling and we just go with time. I think many people are disappointed that time alone doesn't just take away the pain. That's not what happens. It doesn't work that way. So it's myth number one is that time heals everything. Time changes your grief if you work in on your grief in that time. So, it really isn't about how much time has passed. It's really what you chose to do with that time in processing your grief. Let's see. Second most common myth that I see, and I keep looking to the right a little bit because I've made notes because I don't want to, forget any myth. So just excuse me as I look over on my computer here. Second common myth that I've seen is that there are these 5 stages of grief that we should go through. And if you've heard of these stages, these are starting with denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, right? And if you're familiar with the book on death and dying by Elizabeth Kübler-Ross, she talked about this work, and her work was pioneering at the time. But it really wasn't about death. Like that book isn't written for the stages of grief post death of a baby. Um, the book was actually written for people who had terminal illness, like people who were dying themselves, and they went through these stages. So most people I know, including many people who have talked to me or I have talked with other grieving parents, is they say they get hung up on these stages and they say, well, I never really went through the denial phase, or I never really did bargaining. Or for me personally, I said to myself, well, what does it mean that I am not able to accept this loss? Like, when am I gonna get there? So I got hung up on this like big time. Like, why can't I just accept? And I think what these stages do is they create unnecessary confusion because we don't know that these stages really have nothing to do with the process of grieving. So if you've been going through this and you've read this idea about there's steps of grieving, uh, you go through denial and anger and maybe back and forth. These have nothing to do with grieving the loss of a baby. It has to do with, again, grieving the loss in yourself when you have, um, when you've had terminal illness. So that's what the book really was written about. The third myth that I see a lot, and this was something that I guess, not that I was told this, but I just kind of picked up on it in my family. And so the third myth is that we should grieve alone, you know? And I think that this starts from that concept, like, when we're little kids, we start hearing, if you're crying at the dinner table, go to your room, or if you're going to cry, maybe cry alone. And for me, like, it wasn't so much that like you have to go to your room to cry. Like, I'm not brought up like that. Um, but for me, it was like, if I'm going to a family gathering, everybody's happy. Is there going to be space for me to be myself and just cry and be weak and vulnerable? And many times I felt like I was imposing on my family and friends. And it sounds weird, but when you've been through this experience, I think you question everything, and you don't want to be the reason to bring sadness together, especially if you're getting together for a holiday like Thanksgiving or Christmas, or even like Indian culture, there's Diwali and Holi and all these other festivals, right? That you're supposed to celebrate at. Like, I just didn't feel like um, I could cry or be sad, And I think as a society too, um, many people will say, oh, if somebody's sad, they need to be left alone, right? So they can process their feelings. And I think that as grieving moms, we tend to isolate, right? Because we say nobody will understand. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with spending time with yourself. Like, I love spending time alone. I love introspection and reflection. But I think that when we're grieving, we need support and love and understanding from other humans. So, grieving alone, I don't think is an accurate concept or even useful when it comes to grief. So that's a third myth. The fourth myth is this is something that I hear in my own community, in the South Asian culture community, is to be strong. You know, told to be strong. Like, you just need to be strong to get through this. And I just want to say that it's not helpful to the person grieving at all. And it's a thing in my culture, and maybe it's a thing in your culture too. And again, if you relate, put a comment down below. Um, and, many times in my culture, I heard that, oh, your aunt went through this many years ago, or there have been many women who've come before me who've had crazy amounts of loss, and they've been able to work through grief of their child by staying strong. And I just want to say that that made me feel like shameful for what I felt. And I isolated and I started judging myself pretty hard. Like, what's wrong with me that I am grieving the loss so heavily? Why am I not able to move forward in life? And so, I think I also really study the psychology behind what is said in the society. And I think what we're really saying is, when we're saying be strong, I think what it's really saying is that the feelings that you feel are invalid. um, it basically is saying that, whatever you're feeling, just bury it, hide it, or fake it. And I hated doing this. And I've worked on years on myself as a coach doing personal development. And I just knew that this wasn't the right way, is to just be strong through it. Like, think better thoughts, replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts. It just is, trauma is not as simple as that. And I was really happy to hear when my therapist told me that I need to have and I need to create as a grieving mom. And this might be an idea for you if you're going through a difficult time, is to create your own personal blueprint on how you are going to grieve. And it is nobody's business to tell you anything. So I'm going to share my personal blueprint with you guys at the time. And I knew that if I had shared this with my family and friends at the time, people gonna think I'm crazy. But it didn't matter. It was my own personal blueprint that made me feel better in my own journey. So my personal blueprint that I thought of was, I'm gonna mention my son's name, Jayden, if I deem appropriate. Like, at the time, if there's talk of kids that pass away, or talk of stillbirth or miscarriage, like, I'm gonna mention my son's name. And mentioning his name, like, really, as a mom, just made me feel so much better. Second blueprint was, part of the blueprint was, I'm gonna cry whenever I feel like grieving. There's many triggers in society, and so that was one of the things. Third thing that I said was, we're definitely gonna honor Jayden as a family on his anniversary. We're going to invite family in when it feels right. And if they say yes or no, it doesn't matter. We're going to continue to honor Jayden every single year. And so those are some ideas. And then fourth idea that came up for me just in the last few years was, I want to think of Jayden daily. As a mom, we think of our living children daily. I want to think of my son Jayden daily. And so there's different ways that I've done that, and I've made another video on how many butterflies are floating around my house, because I think of Jayden as in butterflies. So do your own personal blueprint. And if you find yourself in a similar situation where you're, hiding your grief, you're hiding your sadness, your thoughts, the message that you're sending to others as you're grieving, is that if you start to hide, you're intuitively also telling other people to hide their difficult emotions. So this is something that I've found, is that whenever I grieve and show up as my true self with my family and friends, I actually subconsciously give permission to everybody around me to honor their emotions too. And they have come up to me to tell me that they're grieving, or they went through this difficult time, and they start crying, and I hold space for them, right? So I think that this myth is something that every grieving parent feels. So and pain is a natural response to loss, grief is a natural response to loss, and so I think it comes with roller coaster of emotions, and much of it doesn't look like strong, so I think we need to stop telling ourselves about this myth that we need to be strong, and instead we need to start being honest about how we're feeling, what we're thinking, and by doing so I think we will support one another as we grieve. So that's myth number 4. Myth number 5 that I've heard is to keep busy. Just keep busy again because they think, society thinks that keeping busy will help you heal. Um, and staying busy helps with not overloading your system with grief and loss. So it's good to have a job to go to, it's good to have work, it's good to have something that brings you out of the bed and to be purposeful, right? But just saying keep busy and that somehow busyness will prevent you from feeling all of the pain, um, that's like further from the truth, because from my experience just keeping busy actually creates more pain to be dealt with later. And we know that what we resist persists, right? And so what we resist we actually create more of, and this is something that I've gone through as a grieving parent, is because I had delayed grief. I didn't know how to allow these emotions of grief to come up, and I didn't know how to process them. I felt very, very raw and vulnerable as a mom, as a person. And so, we can distract ourselves, which, by the way, can come from many different places. Like, you can keep busy with overworking, right? You can keep busy with overeating or over drinking or over shopping, or doing too much social media, like over consuming of information. So, it can be anything that can take us away from feeling these emotions that are associated with loss. So, but this is something that I'm gonna get tattooed on my skin is as a reminder, because one of my favorite quotes is, "The only way out is through." So think about that. The only way out is through. So what that is saying is that the only way you can deal and process your grief is actually to process your grief. So myth number 5 is keeping busy will not help you process your grief. It's good to do it. It's good to be busy with some intentional grieving, practices or ideas like that you do on some sort of a frequency, so you process those feelings or work with a therapist, right? So yeah, the myth number 5 is that you can't go around them, you can't avoid them. You have to just feel these feelings, and no amount of busyness will ever take these feelings away. Like, I did the busy way, right? I did the busy route the first year, and then I thought I was feeling better, and then more and more triggers started showing up. And honestly, guys, these grief feelings were just waiting for me to show up, to meet them. The emotions of grief will wait for you to process. So, you know, keeping busy again, it's about finding a balance, right? Stay busy, but also have balance to do the work of grief. So, and when you stay busy and then intentionally grieve kind of in balance, what it does is it actually allows your brain to process what's happening, because our brain processes information in contrast, right? So, and there's actually a psychological a principle for this, and the name is immersion distraction principle. And it basically dictates that um, in doing the work of grief, talking about what happened, processing things, talking about the feelings, working with a counselor or journaling, like there are many different ways to accomplish that work. And but we can't do this work all the time because it's heavy, right? So we actually do want to attempt to doing these activities with balance of doing activities when we feel like we're in a zone of doing other things. So it could be like you can do many other things, like you could do yoga, you could do gardening. It's summertime right now, and I know many people garden. Maybe it's painting, maybe it's some sort of a creative outlet that when you're doing it, time just passes and you're not thinking about your loss or processing any of it. Or maybe it's at work, right? You have to go to work to do your job. So, yeah, I think what I want to tell you is that um, it's okay to feel bad as long as you need to feel bad for however long it needs to be. To tell yourself that you shouldn't feel bad when you actually feel bad is a recipe for disaster. I've done it many times. I can tell you from my experience, it does not work. If you're feeling bad, it's a normal response to loss. If you're crying, if you feel like grieving, it's a normal response. So I really want to normalize this, so please don't tell yourself or judge yourself that you feel bad, because feeling bad is part of the process. That's what my therapist has told me. And um, I think how weird would it be to not feel bad, right? Like in that first year of me grieving, when I didn't feel bad, I questioned myself. I was feeling guilty. I was like almost shocked that I'm not feeling bad. So I think feeling bad is normal, and it also means that your relationship with your baby that passed away was significant. And this is something, one of my favorite quotes also is, you will grieve for as long as you love, right? And as a mom, I know I'm going to love my child forever. So I'm going to grieve forever, and that is okay. Um, so, anyways, I hope this video was useful to you. If there's any one myth or couple of myths that you related to, please let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, like it. If you want to share it with a friend who's going through this experience, or recently was, or maybe was a few years ago, it doesn't matter. I make these videos. This is my passion work. This is something that I do to create legacy for my son Jayden, and tell you what our family has been through. And if you get the word out for this channel, it's appreciated more than I can ever tell you. So friends, take care. I am so glad that you spent your time with me to listen to this video. I hope it was helpful, and I want to tell you that you've got this, and I will see you next time. Thank you for listening and spending time with me. Bye guys.